Jungkook collapses after uncovering a chilling secret in Jimin's bag, one that threatens to destroy everything they thought was real. Don't open it. The words came too late. Jungkook's fingers had already curled around the zipper, the cold metal biting into his skin as if warning him, as if the bag itself was alive and begging to remain sealed. His breath caught somewhere between curiosity and dread, and in that suspended moment the world seemed to shrink to the dim backstage room, the flickering fluorescent light above, and the quiet, almost unnatural stillness behind him. He hesitated. Not because he didn't trust Jimin, but because he trusted him too much. The zipper slid open with a soft, deliberate sound that echoed far louder than it should have. Inside, neatly folded beneath a layer of dark fabric, was something that didn't belong to the Jimin he knew. A small glass vial. Clear. Colorless. Deadly. Jungkook stared at it, his reflection trembling on the curved surface distorted into something unrecognizable. His pulse hammered against his ribs, each beat louder than the last until it drowned out everything else, until even Jimin's voice became nothing more than a distant, broken echo. Jungkook don't. But he already had. His hand trembled as he lifted the vial, the liquid inside catching the light in a way that felt wrong, like it absorbed brightness instead of reflecting it. His mind scrambled to make sense of it, to attach logic to something that refused to be logical. Jimin didn't carry things like this. Jimin who hated hospitals. Jimin who flinched at the sight of needles. Jimin who... Put it back. This time Jimin's voice was closer. Too close. Jungkook turned slowly, his body stiff as if every joint had suddenly forgotten how to move naturally. Jimin stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the harsh hallway lights, his expression unreadable in the shadows. But his eyes weren't the same. There was no softness in them, no warmth, only something sharp, calculating. Fear slipped into Jungkook's chest like ice water. "What is this?" he asked, though his voice betrayed him, cracking under the weight of something he didn't want to name. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, each movement measured, controlled. The air shifted with him, growing heavier, harder to breathe. Jungkook felt it press against his lungs, forcing shallow breaths that did nothing to calm the storm rising inside him. "It's not what you think." That was worse. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh, the sound scraping against his throat. "Then tell me what I'm supposed to think." Silence. Jimin's gaze flickered, not to Jungkook but to the vial in his hand. And for a split second, something broke through that carefully constructed calm. Panic. Raw, unfiltered, terrifying. "Give it to me," Jimin said, his voice lower now, urgent in a way that made Jungkook take an involuntary step back. "No." The word came out instinctively. A boundary. A line drawn without thought, only feeling. Jimin froze. The distance between them suddenly felt dangerous, charged with something neither of them could fully control. "You don't understand," Jimin whispered, and there it was again, that flicker of something human, something fragile beneath the surface. "Then help me understand." Jungkook's voice rose, desperation bleeding through, "because right now it looks like you've been hiding something from me, something big." Jimin's jaw tightened. "I was trying to protect you." The words landed heavily, but they didn't make sense. Not with the cold glass pressed against Jungkook's palm, not with the way Jimin's eyes kept darting toward it like it was the center of everything. "From what?" Jungkook asked, softer now. Jimin didn't answer. Instead, he took another step forward. And that was when Jungkook noticed it. The faint tremor in Jimin's hands. The uneven rise and fall of his chest. The way his composure, so carefully maintained, was beginning to fracture. Something was wrong. Not just with the vial. With Jimin. "You're scared," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin shook his head too quickly. "I'm not." "You aren't." "I'm not scared for me." That made Jungkook's heart stop. "Then who?" The room tilted. At first, it was subtle, a slight shift in balance like the ground beneath him had softened. But then it grew stronger, sharper, until the edges of his vision blurred and the fluorescent light above stretched into long, distorted streaks. Jungkook blinked, trying to steady himself, but his grip on the vial loosened as his fingers went numb. "What?" he murmured. Jimin's expression changed instantly. All that control gone. Jungkook. The way he said his name, it wasn't fear anymore. It was terror. The kind that came too late. Jungkook's knees buckled, his body betraying him as the strength drained from his limbs all at once. The vial slipped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a sharp crack, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the confined space. He barely registered it. Because suddenly he couldn't breathe. His chest tightened violently, air refusing to fill his lungs no matter how hard he tried. His vision darkened at the edges, swallowing the room piece by piece until all that remained was Jimin, rushing toward him, his face pale, his hands reaching out. I told you not to open it. Jungkook hit the ground before he could finish. The impact barely registered. Everything was slipping. Fading. But even as consciousness abandoned him, one thought burned through the chaos, sharp and undeniable. Jimin knew this would happen. And he had let it happen anyway. Darkness swallowed him whole. And Jimin's voice, shaking, breaking, was the last thing he heard before everything disappeared. Please don't die. The sound of Jungkook's body hitting the floor didn't fade, it lingered, echoing in Jimin's ears long after silence swallowed the room. Jungkook, wake up. His voice cracked as he dropped to his knees, hands shaking violently as they hovered over Jungkook's motionless form before finally gripping his shoulders. The warmth of Jungkook's skin was still there, but something was wrong, too still, too quiet, as if the life inside him had been abruptly paused. No, this isn't happening. Jimin's breath came out uneven, almost suffocating him as panic clawed its way up his throat. He pressed his trembling fingers against Jungkook's neck, searching, begging for a pulse. There. Faint. Weak. But there. A broken exhale escaped him, half relief, half dread. Stay with me, he whispered, his voice dropping into something fragile, something raw that he had buried for far too long. You don't get to leave like this, not because of me. Jungkook didn't respond. His chest barely moved, each breath shallow and strained, like his body was fighting against something unseen, something already spreading through him. Jimin's eyes darted to the shattered vial on the floor. The liquid had seeped out, invisible against the surface, but he knew it was there. He could feel it, like a silent threat lingering in the air. Damn it! His hands curled into fists before he forced himself to move. Carefully, urgently, he slid one arm under Jungkook's back, lifting him just enough to keep his airway open, his other hand brushing Jungkook's hair away from his face. You weren't supposed to touch it, Jimin muttered, more to himself than to him. I told you not to. His words broke. Because deep down he knew. He hadn't told him enough. Footsteps echoed from the hallway outside, distant at first, then closer. Voices. Did you hear that? What was that noise? Jimin's entire body went rigid. No. Not now. Not like this. His gaze snapped toward the door, calculation replacing panic in an instant. If anyone walked in, if anyone saw this, everything would unravel. Jungkook. The vial. The truth. And Jimin couldn't let that happen. Not yet. Forgive me, he whispered. In one swift motion, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small injector, sleek, metallic, designed for emergencies that were never meant to exist. His thumb hovered over the trigger for half a second, hesitation flickering across his face. This is the only way. He pressed it against Jungkook's neck. A soft click. Jungkook's body jerked slightly in response, a faint gasp escaping his lips as the substance entered his bloodstream. Come on, fight it. The footsteps outside grew louder. Jimin, Jungkook, are you guys in there? Jimin's head snapped up. Too late. The door handle turned. The light from the hallway spilled into the room, cutting across the floor and landing directly on them. Jimin didn't move. He couldn't. Because now there were witnesses. Two staff members stood frozen in the doorway. Their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm in a matter of seconds. Oh my God, what happened? Jimin's mind raced. Think. But for the first time in a long time, he had no control over the situation. Jungkook stirred. It was subtle. A weak broken inhale, but it was enough. Jimin's attention snapped back instantly, hope and fear colliding in his chest. Jungkook. His eyes fluttered. Slowly. Unsteadily. And when they finally opened, they weren't filled with relief. They were filled with something else. Confusion. Pain. And something far more dangerous. You lied to me. The words were barely audible, but they hit harder than anything else. Jimin froze. Jungkook's gaze locked onto him, unfocused yet burning with a quiet intensity that sent a chill down his spine. That wasn't just something you were hiding, Jungkook's voice trembled, each word a struggle. That was meant to hurt someone. The room went completely silent. Even the people at the door didn't dare to move. Jimin swallowed hard, his throat dry, his chest tightening under the weight of everything he had tried to keep buried. It wasn't supposed to be you. A dangerous truth. Spoken too soon. Jungkook's expression shifted, just slightly but enough to make something inside Jimin crack. Then who? Jungkook whispered. Jimin didn't answer. Because the answer would destroy everything. Instead he looked away. And that was all Jungkook needed. A weak, bitter laugh escaped him, though it sounded more like pain than amusement. Unbelievable, he murmured. All this time I thought I knew you. You do, Jimin said quickly, almost desperately. You know me better than anyone. Then prove it. The words cut through him. Jimin hesitated. And in that hesitation, the truth became undeniable. Jungkook's eyes slowly closed again, not from unconsciousness this time but from something deeper. Disappointment. Yeah, he whispered faintly, that's what I thought. Jimin felt it like a physical blow. The distance between them, once invisible, once non-existent, had never felt so vast. The staff finally rushed forward, voices overlapping, panic filling the room as they called for help, for medics, for anything that could make sense of what was happening. But Jimin didn't hear them. He only heard the echo of Jungkook's voice. He only saw the way he had looked at him. Like a stranger. And for the first time, Jimin realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about the vial anymore. This was about everything he had hidden. Everything he had done. And the moment Jungkook learned the full truth, there would be no going back. The siren's distant wail bled into the sterile hum of the hospital long before Jungkook became fully aware of where he was. At first it was just fragments. A ceiling too white. Lights too bright. A bitter taste coating the back of his tongue. Then pain followed, sharp, invasive, spreading through his veins like something alive, something that didn't belong inside him. His eyes snapped open. A harsh breath tore from his chest as his body jolted against the thin hospital mattress, fingers instinctively clutching at the sheets as if grounding himself in something real. Easy, you're awake. A voice, not the one he wanted. Jungkook turned his head, vision still swimming until the blurry outline of a doctor came into focus. Monitors beeped steadily beside him, their rhythm cold and mechanical, reminding him that whatever had happened, it wasn't over. Where his voice cracked, raw and unfamiliar, where is he? The doctor hesitated. That hesitation was all it took. Jungkook's expression darkened instantly, a flicker of anger cutting through the confusion. Where is Jimin? He's outside, the doctor replied carefully. You need to rest. I don't need rest, Jungkook snapped, forcing himself up despite the way his body screamed in protest. The IV line tugged painfully at his arm, but he ignored it, breathing hard as memories began crashing back all at once. The bag. The vial. Jimin's face. You need to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down, Jungkook's voice echoed through the room, sharp and unsteady. He knew what that thing would do to me. The door opened before the doctor could respond. Silence fell like a blade. Jimin stood there. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jungkook's chest rose and fell unevenly, his gaze locking onto Jimin with a mixture of disbelief and something far more dangerous, something colder. Jimin looked worse than he had ever seen him. Pale. Exhausted. Eyes rimmed with red, like he hadn't blinked in hours. But Jungkook didn't care. Not anymore. Leave, Jungkook said, his voice low, directed at the doctor. The room hesitated. Then obeyed. The door shut softly behind them, sealing the tension inside like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Jimin took a step forward. Jungkook. Don't. The word hit like a slap. Jimin stopped immediately. Don't say my name like nothing happened, Jungkook continued, his voice trembling now not from weakness but from the sheer force of everything he was holding back. Don't stand there and pretend this is normal. I'm not pretending. Then explain it. Silence. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head as he swung his legs off the bed despite the dizziness creeping back in. He stood unsteady but determined, every movement fueled by anger that refused to settle. You had something in your bag, he said slowly, each word deliberate, something that almost killed me. It wasn't meant to. Stop saying that, Jungkook's voice broke louder now, sharper. You keep saying it wasn't meant for me, like that makes it better, like that makes it okay. Jimin's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. It doesn't, he said quietly. You think I don't know that? Then tell me who it was for. Jimin didn't answer. Jungkook stepped closer, ignoring the way the room tilted slightly with the movement. Who was it for, Jimin? Jungkook. Who? The word landed heavy. Final. Jimin looked at him, then really looked at him, and something shifted in his expression. The hesitation didn't disappear, but it changed, turning into something darker, something resigned. You won't like the answer. Jungkook let out a bitter scoff. Try me. A long pause stretched between them. Then, it was for someone in the company. The words hung in the air, suffocating. Jungkook blinked as if his brain refused to process them properly. What? They've been watching us, Jimin continued, his voice low, controlled, but beneath it there was something else, something unstable. Watching everything, controlling things behind the scenes, people disappearing, contracts changing overnight, things that don't make sense unless you're paying attention. That doesn't explain why you had poison in your bag. It's not poison. Jungkook's expression twisted. It almost killed me. Because you weren't supposed to be exposed to it like that, Jimin snapped, the restraint finally cracking. It's a compound experimental meant to paralyze, not kill, temporarily. Jungkook stared at him, disbelief written across every inch of his face. You're insane. Maybe, Jimin shot back, his voice rising now, but I'm not wrong. You're talking about attacking someone, Jungkook said, his chest tightening again, but this time it wasn't physical. Do you even hear yourself right now? I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when they're threatening everything. The words exploded out of Jimin before he could stop them. Silence followed immediately. Jungkook froze. What? Jimin's breathing hitched slightly, like he had just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. They know about us, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The world seemed to stop. Jungkook felt it, like the ground beneath him had vanished entirely, leaving him suspended in something cold and endless. They've known for a while, Jimin continued, each word heavier than the last, and they made it very clear what would happen if it became a problem. Jungkook's throat went dry. What kind of problems? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Because the look in his eyes said everything. Ruin. Exposure. Loss. They were going to destroy you, Jimin said quietly. Your career, your image, everything you've worked for, and they would have done it in a way that made you look like the villain. Jungkook took a step back, shaking his head instinctively. No, that doesn't. Why would they? Because control is power, Jimin cut in sharply, and you don't let something unpredictable exist when you're trying to control a narrative. Jungkook's chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't from the drug. It was from the weight of the truth pressing down on him. So your solution was what? He asked, his voice quieter now but no less intense. Attack someone before they could attack me. I was trying to stop it before it started. By becoming exactly what they'd want you to be. Jungkook's eyes burned now, frustration bleeding into something deeper. Do you even hear yourself? Jimin faltered. For the first time since he walked in, he didn't have an answer. Jungkook let out a slow, unsteady breath, running a hand through his hair as he turned away, trying to piece everything together. You should have told me, he said after a moment, his voice softer, but it hurt more. Whatever this is, whatever they're doing, I had a right to know. I was trying to protect you. By lying to me. Jimin stepped forward again, desperation creeping back in. I didn't lie. You hid something that could have killed me. Jungkook turned back sharply, his voice rising again. That's not protection, Jimin, that's betrayal. The word hit hard. Jimin visibly flinched. I didn't want you involved. You involved me the second you made that decision. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Jimin's shoulders sank slightly, the fight draining out of him in a way that made him look smaller. I thought I could handle it, he admitted quietly. I thought if I just took care of it myself, you'd never have to know. Jungkook's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened further. And now I do. Jimin swallowed, his gaze dropping for a split second before forcing himself to meet Jungkook's eyes again. I'm sorry. The words were simple. But they weren't enough. Jungkook shook his head slowly, taking another step back as if distance could somehow make sense of everything. I don't even know who you are right now, he said, his voice barely holding together. The Jimin I know wouldn't do something like this. A flicker of pain crossed Jimin's face. People change when they're pushed far enough. Or when they start hiding things, Jungkook replied coldly. That silence again. But this time it felt final. Jimin didn't move. Didn't argue. Because deep down he knew. This wasn't something he could fix with words. And Jungkook wasn't sure he wanted him to. The rain started without warning, slamming against the hospital windows like it had been waiting for the exact moment everything fell apart. Jungkook stood there, unmoving, staring at the glass as the city blurred into streaks of gray and white. The silence behind him was unbearable, thick with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. Say something. Jimin's voice came out quieter this time, stripped of the sharpness from before, almost uncertain. Jungkook didn't turn around. What do you want me to say? He asked flatly. That I understand, that I'm okay with this. That's not what I'm asking. Then what are you asking for? Jimin hesitated. Jungkook let out a bitter exhale, his reflection in the window barely recognizable, tired eyes, pale skin, something broken lingering beneath the surface. You want forgiveness, he continued, his voice steady but hollow, because I don't think I have that in me right now. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jimin said quickly, stepping closer, careful, like approaching something fragile that could shatter at any second. I'm asking you to trust me. That made Jungkook laugh. Not loudly. Not genuinely. Just enough to hurt. Trust you, he repeated, turning slightly now, enough for Jimin to see the disbelief etched across his face. After everything you just told me. I didn't have a choice. You keep saying that, Jungkook snapped, finally facing him fully. But every time you do, it sounds more like an excuse. It's not an excuse, it's the truth. Then maybe your truth is the problem. The words hit harder than either of them expected. Jimin froze. Jungkook's chest rose and fell sharply like he was fighting to keep himself together, but the cracks were already there, spreading, impossible to ignore. You think you're the only one who's been under pressure? Jungkook continued, his voice rising, emotion spilling through every word. You think I haven't felt it, the expectations, the control, the constant fear of messing up, but I didn't turn into this. This, Jimin echoed, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. Someone who carries around weapons like it's nothing. It's not a weapon. It put me in the hospital. That wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. The room seemed to shake with the force of their voices, the storm outside only amplifying the chaos inside. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing once, twice, like he needed movement just to keep from exploding. You're not listening to me, he said, his voice dropping again, but it was worse now, tense, strained, barely controlled. This isn't just about us, this is bigger than that. Then make me understand, Jungkook shot back immediately. Because right now, all I see is someone I thought I knew standing in front of me like a stranger. That word again. Stranger. It lingered in the space between them, sharp and unforgiving. Jimin stopped moving. For a moment he just stood there, staring at Jungkook like he was trying to decide something, like he was standing on the edge of a decision he couldn't come back from. "You want the truth?" he asked quietly. "I've been asking for it this whole time." Jimin nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Fine." The word felt heavy. "Final." "They didn't just threaten your career." Jungkook's breath hitched slightly. "They threatened your life." The room went still. Even the sound of the rain seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a ringing silence that pressed in from all sides. "What?" Jungkook whispered. Jimin didn't look away. "There have been accidents before," he said, his voice steady in a way that made it even more terrifying. "People who got too difficult, too unpredictable, too hard to control, and suddenly something happens, a scandal, an injury, a disappearance." Jungkook shook his head instinctively. No, that doesn't happen, not like that." "It does," Jimin said firmly, "you just don't see it because they make sure you don't." "That's insane." "Is it?" Jimin stepped closer again, his gaze intense now, almost desperate. "Or is it just something you don't want to believe?" Jungkook opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because a part of him, a small, quiet part, had noticed things too. Things that didn't add up. People who were there one day and gone the next. Stories that changed overnight. He had ignored it. He had chosen to ignore it. "That still doesn't explain why you took it this far," Jungkook said finally, his voice weaker now but no less conflicted. "You said it yourself, that thing, it's experimental, you don't even know what it could have done." "I knew enough." "You almost killed me, Jimin." The words landed softly this time. But they hurt more than when they were shouted. Jimin's expression cracked, guilt flashing across his face before he could hide it. "I would never hurt you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Never." "But you did." Silence. Jimin closed his eyes for a brief moment, like he was absorbing the weight of that truth, letting it settle deep into his bones. "I was trying to stop them," he said quietly. "There's someone inside the company, someone high up who's orchestrating everything. If I could just get to him first." "What were you going to do?" Jungkook interrupted sharply. "Use that on him, force him to talk." Jimin didn't answer. That was answer enough. Jungkook let out a disbelieving laugh, running his hands over his face. "You've lost it." "Maybe," Jimin admitted, "but I'm the only one doing something about it." "And what happens when you get caught?" Jungkook demanded. "What happens when they turn this around on you, on us?" "They won't." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've already been careful." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "Careful? You collapsed me in a backstage room, Jimin, people saw." "I handled it." "That's not handling it. It is when they don't know what really happened." Jungkook stared at him, searching his face for something, anything that still resembled the person he trusted. "You're in too deep," he said finally. Jimin didn't deny it. "I don't have the luxury of stepping back." "You always have a choice." "Not this time." Jungkook shook his head slowly, stepping back again, the distance between them growing with every second. "I can't do this," he said quietly. Jimin's chest tightened. "Do what?" "This," Jungkook repeated, gesturing vaguely between them. "Whatever this is now, I can't stand here and pretend like everything's fine when it's not." "I'm not asking you to pretend." "Then what are you asking for?" Jimin didn't have an answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know anymore. Jungkook let out a shaky breath, his gaze dropping to the floor before lifting again, steadier this time. "You need to stop," he said. "Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you're doing, it's not going to end the way you think it will." "I can't stop." "You can." "I won't." The words came out before Jimin could soften them. Jungkook flinched. Not visibly. But enough. "Then you're choosing this," he said quietly, "over everything else." Jimin's silence confirmed it. And something in Jungkook's expression changed. Not anger. Not even sadness. Something colder. More final. "Then we're done." The words hung in the air, heavier than anything else that had been said. Jimin's breath caught. "Jungkook." "I can't trust you," Jungkook continued, his voice steady now even as his eyes betrayed the storm inside him. "And without that, there's nothing left." "That's not true." "It is for me." Jimin took a step forward, panic creeping in again, sharper this time. "You don't mean that." "I do." Another step back from Jungkook. Another inch of distance. Don't do this, Jimin said, his voice breaking for the first time. Not like this. You already did, Jungkook replied softly. And that was it. The final crack. Jimin stopped moving. Because for the first time since this started, he realized he might have already lost him. The rain outside intensified, drowning the city in a relentless storm. Inside, the silence that followed was even louder. And neither of them knew how to fill it anymore. The night didn't end when Jungkook walked out of that hospital room, it fractured. The hallway lights stretched endlessly as he moved forward, each step heavier than the last, like gravity itself had turned against him. Nurses called after him, someone tried to stop him, but their voices blurred into meaningless noise. All he could hear was the echo of Jimin's last words, tangled with his own. Then we're done. It didn't feel real. It felt like something he had said in anger, something that should have dissolved the moment he stepped outside. But it didn't. It clung to him, suffocating, pressing against his chest until breathing became a conscious effort. Jungkook. He stopped. Of course he did. Because no matter how far he tried to go, that voice still had a way of reaching him. Slowly, reluctantly, he turned around. Jimin stood at the far end of the hallway, slightly out of breath, his hair damp from the rain, his expression somewhere between desperation and determination. He had followed him. Of course he had. Don't, Jungkook said immediately, his voice firm despite the exhaustion pulling at every inch of him. Don't come any closer. Jimin froze mid-step. For a moment, neither of them moved, the distance between them stretching like a fragile thread ready to snap. You weren't supposed to leave like that, Jimin said, his voice uneven. Jungkook let out a quiet, humorless laugh. What was I supposed to do? Stay, pretend like you didn't just admit to everything. I didn't admit to everything. That made Jungkook's expression darken instantly. Exactly. Silence fell again, heavier this time, filled with things too sharp to say out loud. Jimin swallowed hard, forcing himself to take a step forward despite the warning. There are things you still don't know. And whose fault is that? Jungkook shot back. You had plenty of chances, Jimin, you just chose not to. I was trying to protect you. Stop saying that like it justifies anything. Their voices echoed through the hallway, drawing glances from people passing by, but neither of them cared anymore. Jimin ran a hand over his face, frustration bleeding through every movement. You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted any of this? No, Jungkook said sharply, but you chose it anyway. That hit. Jimin's shoulders tensed, his jaw tightening as something darker flickered beneath the surface. I didn't choose this, it was forced on me. Then you should have fought it the right way. And what is the right way, Jungkook? Jimin's voice rose, sharper now, cutting through the air like glass. Waiting until they destroy everything, until they come after you for real, you think playing nice was going to save us. At least I wouldn't have become like them. The words landed hard. Too hard. Jimin went still. Something in his expression shifted, not anger, not frustration. Something colder. You really think I'm like them now? He asked quietly. Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. Jimin let out a slow breath, nodding once as if confirming something to himself. I see. Jimin. No, it's fine, Jimin cut in, his voice eerily calm now. If that's how you see me, then maybe there's nothing left to explain. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Jimin stepped closer again, his eyes locked onto Jungkook with an intensity that made it hard to look away. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you've already made up your mind. Jungkook opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because the truth was, he didn't know anymore. Everything felt unstable. Uncertain. Jimin's gaze softened for just a fraction of a second, like he saw that hesitation, like he recognized it. And it hurt. I never wanted you to get involved, he said quietly, not like this. Well, I am, Jungkook replied, his voice quieter now but steady. So stop acting like you can still control what happens next. Jimin's lips parted slightly like he was about to argue, but then he stopped. Because Jungkook was right. For the first time, this wasn't something he could handle alone. They're watching us, Jimin said after a moment, his voice dropping again, more cautious now. Jungkook frowned. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said, Jimin replied. You think all of this is just coincidence, the timing, the pressure, the way things keep escalating. It's not. Jungkook's chest tightened. You're saying someone been monitoring us this whole time? Yes. How? Jimin hesitated. Then his eyes flicked, just briefly, to the security camera mounted at the corner of the ceiling. Jungkook followed his gaze and felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're serious? I wouldn't joke about this. Jungkook looked back at him, his mind racing, trying to piece everything together, trying to separate paranoia from reality, but the look on Jimin's face made it impossible to dismiss. Then why are you telling me this now, he asked. If they're watching, why say anything at all? Because it doesn't matter anymore. The words were quiet, but they carried a weight that made Jungkook's pulse spike. What does that mean? Jimin took a step closer. This time Jungkook didn't tell him to stop. Because they already know that you know, Jimin said. The hallway suddenly felt too small. Too exposed. Jungkook's breath hitched. How? Jimin's expression darkened. The moment you collapsed, everything changed. They don't take risks like that. If there was even a chance you saw something you weren't supposed to, they'd act. Jungkook finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Jimin nodded. A heavy silence settled between them. So what now? Jungkook asked, the question coming out before he could stop it. Jimin didn't answer immediately. For the first time, there was no plan in his eyes. No certainty. Just something raw. I don't know, he admitted. That scared Jungkook more than anything else. Because Jimin always knew. He always had something. A solution. A way out. But now, nothing. A sharp sound cut through the tension. Footsteps. Not distant. Not casual. Purposeful. Both of them turned at the same time. 3 men in dark suits were walking down the hallway toward them, their pace steady, their expressions unreadable. But there was no mistaking it. They weren't here by accident. Jungkook's heart slammed against his ribs. Do you know them? Jimin's jaw tightened. Yes. Who are they? Jimin didn't take his eyes off them as they got closer, his body subtly shifting, positioning himself slightly in front of Jungkook without even realizing it. They're the reason all of this started. The men stopped a few feet away. Close enough to feel the tension radiating between them. One of them stepped forward, a faint, polite smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. Park Jimin, he said smoothly, we've been looking for you. Jimin didn't respond. The man's gaze shifted to Jungkook, assessing, calculating. And you must be Jian Jungkook. Jungkook felt his chest tighten under that gaze, something instinctive telling him this was wrong, dangerously wrong. We'd like to have a conversation, the man continued, his tone calm but firm, both of you. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. Jimin didn't look away from them. And that was all the answer he needed. This isn't a request, is it? Jungkook asked quietly. The man's smile widened slightly. No, he said. It is. The storm outside raged on, thunder rumbling in the distance as the tension inside the hallway reached a breaking point. Jungkook's pulse pounded in his ears, his mind racing, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his feet stayed rooted to the ground. Because running wouldn't fix this. Not anymore. Jimin took a slow breath beside him. And for the first time since everything began, they were standing on the same side of something. Even if neither of them knew how it would end, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that felt far too calm for what waited inside. After you, the man in the suit said, his polite smile never fading, even as the weight of the situation pressed down like a vice. Jungkook didn't move at first. Neither did Jimin. For a brief second, the world narrowed to the space between them, the shared tension, the unspoken words, the fragile thread of something that hadn't completely broken despite everything. Then Jimin stepped forward. Not because he wanted to, but because he understood something Jungkook was only beginning to realize. There was no way out of this. Jungkook followed, his jaw tight, every instinct screaming at him that this was wrong, that stepping into that elevator was like stepping into something irreversible. The doors closed behind them with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any slam. The descent began. No one spoke. The hum of the elevator filled the silence, mechanical and steady, in stark contrast to the chaos building beneath Jungkook's ribs. He could feel Jimin beside him, close, tense, breathing just as unevenly. One of the men finally broke the silence. "You've caused quite a disturbance tonight." Jimin didn't look at him. "I didn't realize collapsing someone counted as a disturbance." Jungkook shot him a sharp glance, but Jimin didn't meet it. The man chuckled softly as if amused. "Let's not pretend we don't know what this is about." "Then stop pretending," Jimin replied coldly. "Say it." Another pause. The elevator slowed. Ding! The doors opened to a floor Jungkook had never seen before, dimly lit, empty, sterile in a way that didn't feel like part of the hospital at all. It felt hidden. Deliberately so. "Walk," the man instructed. They did. The hallway stretched long and quiet, each step echoing in a way that made Jungkook hyper-aware of everything. The way the air felt colder here, the faint smell of antiseptic mixed with something metallic, the absence of any normal hospital noise. This wasn't a place people were meant to find. They stopped in front of a door. The man opened it. Inside, Jimin entered first. Jungkook followed, slower this time, his eyes scanning everything instinctively. The room was simple. Too simple. A table, 4 chairs, no windows. A single light overhead casting sharp shadows across the floor. The kind of room where truths weren't just spoken. They were forced out. Zit. Jimin didn't hesitate. Jungkook did, but only for a second before taking the seat beside him. The distance between their chairs was small, but it felt like miles. The men took their places across from them. The one who had been speaking folded his hands neatly on the table, his expression composed. "Let's stop wasting time." Jimin leaned back slightly, his posture controlled, but Jungkook could see it, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers curled subtly against his leg. "You've been interfering," the man continued, his tone calm but sharp, "investigating things that don't concern you." Jimin let out a quiet scoff. "That depends on your definition of concern." "It doesn't," the man replied. "You crossed a line." "And what line would that be?" Jimin shot back. "The one where people start disappearing, or the one where you threaten them into silence?" Jungkook's breath caught slightly. The air shifted. For a moment the polite facade cracked. "Not completely. But enough." "You're making dangerous accusations," the man said, his smile tightening. "And you're avoiding them," Jimin countered. Silence stretched. Then, a file slid across the table. It stopped directly in front of Jungkook. His name was on it. His chest tightened. "What is this?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Open it," the man said. Jungkook hesitated. Then slowly he did. The contents hit him like a punch to the gut. Photos. Articles. Headlines. Fabricated but disturbingly convincing. Scandals that never happened. Rumors twisted into something ugly, something destructive. And at the center of it all, him. "What?" his voice faltered. "What is this?" "A precaution," the man replied simply. Jungkook looked up, his hands tightening around the edges of the file. "This is fake." "Of course it is." "Then why?" "Because it doesn't need to be real to destroy you." The words landed with brutal clarity. Jungkook felt the room tilt slightly, the weight of it pressing down on him in a way that made it hard to breathe. "They were going to release this," Jimin said quietly, his voice cutting through the haze, "if I didn't cooperate." Jungkook turned to him sharply. "Cooperate with what?" Jimin didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was worse than anything Jungkook had imagined. "Me." The man across the table smiled again. And this time there was nothing polite about it. "We offered him a choice," he continued smoothly. "Help us maintain stability or watch everything you've built burn to the ground." Jungkook's stomach twisted. "And this," he gestured to the file, his voice rising slightly, "this is your idea of stability. It's effective. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." Jungkook pushed the file away, anger flaring through him, sharp and uncontrollable. "You're blackmailing him." We're giving him an opportunity. To do what? Jungkook demanded. Hurt people for you. Jimin's silence was deafening. Jungkook turned to him again, something desperate creeping into his voice. Jimin, what did they ask you to do? Jimin's jaw tightened. Say it. They wanted me to handle problems, Jimin said finally, his voice low, almost detached, quietly. Jungkook felt something inside him crack. And you agreed. I didn't have a choice. You always say that. Because it's true. No, it's because it's easier than admitting you made the wrong decision. The words hit hard. Jimin flinched just slightly. But it was enough. You think I wanted this? Jimin shot back, his voice rising now, emotion breaking through the control he had been clinging to. You think I wanted to become someone who carries things like that around, who plans things like that? Then why didn't you tell me, Jungkook demanded, why didn't you trust me enough to face it together? Because they would have come after you faster. They already did. Silence. Sharp. Painful. Unavoidable. Jungkook's chest heaved as he tried to steady himself, his gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again, more intense than before. I would have chosen to stand with you, he said, his voice quieter now but firm, no matter what. Jimin's expression faltered. Just for a second. But it was enough. You don't get to make that choice for me, Jungkook continued. You don't get to decide what I can handle. I was trying to keep you safe. And now look where we are. The truth hung between them. Heavy. Unforgiving. The man across the table watched the exchange with quiet interest, like he was observing something fascinating rather than something devastating. Emotional, he said lightly, but irrelevant. Jungkook's head snapped toward him, anger flaring again. You don't get to. You're both missing the point, the man interrupted smoothly. This isn't a negotiation. Jimin's gaze hardened. Then what is it? A reminder. The word sent a chill down Jungkook's spine. A reminder, the man repeated, that we are in control, not you. Jimin leaned forward slightly, his eyes sharp. Control is fragile. The man smiled. Not when it's built correctly. Another file appeared. This time it wasn't placed in front of Jungkook. It was placed in front of Jimin. Jimin didn't touch it. He didn't need to. Because he already knew what was inside. You've been useful, the man continued, but you've also become unpredictable. Jungkook's heart skipped. What does that mean? He asked. The man's gaze shifted to him briefly. It means, he said calmly, that we're reconsidering his position. The air in the room changed instantly. Jimin's body went rigid. Jungkook felt it too, that subtle shift, that underlying threat that wasn't being spoken directly but was impossible to ignore. You don't get to decide that, Jimin said. His voice low. We already have. And if I refuse? The man's smile didn't waver. Then we release the file. Jungkook's chest tightened again, the reality of it crashing down harder than before. Everything. Gone. Destroyed in an instant. Jimin didn't respond immediately. Because for the first time, he didn't know what the right move was. And Jungkook could see it. That uncertainty. That fear. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about both of them. And the choice in front of Jimin wasn't simple. It was impossible. The room fell into a suffocating silence as the weight of it settled over them, pressing down from all sides, leaving no room to breathe. And for the first time since this began, Jungkook realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a fight. It was a trap. And they had walked straight into it together. The silence inside the room stretched so tight it felt like it might snap at any second. Jimin didn't move. Jungkook didn't breathe. The man across the table simply watched, patient, as if he already knew how this would end. Open it, he said, nodding toward the file in front of Jimin. Jimin's fingers hovered just above the surface. For a brief moment, Jungkook thought he wouldn't do it, that he would push back, refuse, walk away even if it meant everything falling apart. But then Jimin exhaled. And opened it. Jungkook saw the exact second it hit him. Not shock. Not surprise. Something worse. Recognition. What is it? Jungkook asked, his voice low, tense. Jimin didn't answer. His eyes scanned the contents, jaw tightening with every line, every image, every word that Jungkook couldn't see but could feel like a growing storm. Jimin, Jungkook pressed, leaning closer. What's in there? Slowly, Jimin closed the file. Carefully. Too carefully. It's nothing, he said. Jungkook froze. Then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. Nothing, he repeated, his voice rising. You just looked like the world ended and you're telling me it's nothing. It doesn't concern you. The words were quiet. Controlled. And they hit harder than anything else. Jungkook stared at him, disbelief flickering into something sharper. You don't get to say that. I just did. No, you don't get to shut me out again, Jungkook snapped, his voice breaking through the tension like glass. Not after everything that's happened. Jimin's expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes shifted. A wall. Going back up. This is different. Stop saying that, Jungkook slammed his hand against the table, the sound echoing through the room. Everything is always different with you, every time it gets hard, every time it actually matters. It's for your own good. I'm so tired of hearing that. The room pulsed with their voices, the tension thick enough to choke on. The man across from them didn't interrupt. Didn't need to. Because this fracture between them was exactly what he wanted. You think shutting me out is protecting me? Jungkook continued, his voice trembling now, but he didn't stop. You think making decisions behind my back, risking everything without even telling me is somehow better? Jimin looked at him then. Really looked at him. And for a split second the mask slipped. I'm trying to save you, he said quietly. From what? Jungkook demanded. From the truth. From what's in that file. Jungkook's chest tightened. Then show me. No. The refusal came instantly. Sharply. Final. Jungkook felt something inside him snap. You don't trust me. It wasn't a question. Jimin didn't answer. Because he couldn't. And that silence was louder than anything else. Jungkook leaned back slightly, shaking his head slowly, his expression shifting from anger to something colder, more distant. Unbelievable, he muttered. Jungkook. No, Jungkook cut him off immediately. I get it now. Jimin's stomach dropped. Get what? You don't see me as your equal, Jungkook said, his voice steady but cutting. You never did. I'm just someone you need to protect, to manage, to keep in the dark so I don't mess up your plans. That's not true. Then prove it. Jimin hesitated. And that hesitation, it destroyed whatever was left. Jungkook let out a hollow breath, nodding once as if confirming something to himself. Yeah, that's what I thought. Across the table the man smiled faintly. Satisfied. Emotions aside, he said smoothly, breaking into the moment like it didn't matter, we still have a situation to resolve. Jimin's gaze snapped back to him, sharp again, defensive. Say what you want. The man leaned forward slightly, folding his hands. The contents of that file are simple, he said. If you continue to be difficult, it will be released. Jungkook's jaw tightened. What is it? The man's eyes flicked toward him, amused. Something far more effective than rumors. A pause. Then, evidence. The word hit differently. Heavier. More real. Jungkook felt a chill run down his spine. Evidence of what? No answer. He turned back to Jimin, desperation creeping in again. What did they put in there? Jimin's silence was unbearable. Jimin. Nothing. Tell me. I can't, Jimin said, his voice breaking slightly. That was it. That was the moment something irreparable gave way. Jungkook stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't or you will. Jungkook. Which one is it? I won't, Jimin snapped back, louder this time, the control finally slipping. Because if you see it, there's no going back. There's already no going back, Jungkook shouted, his chest heaving. You think we can just pretend this did happen, that we can walk out of here and everything will be fine? I'm trying to make sure you can walk out of here at all. The words hit like a blow. Jungkook froze. What does that mean? Jimin's breathing was uneven now, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. It means they're not just threatening your reputation anymore, he said, his voice low, raw. They're escalating. Jungkook felt his pulse spike, escalating how. Jimin looked at him. And for the first time since this started, he looked afraid. Your collapse tonight, he said quietly, that wasn't just an accident. The room went completely still. Jungkook's mind struggled to catch up. What are you saying? Jimin's gaze flicked briefly to the men across the table. Then back. They tampered with it. Everything stopped. The air. The sound. Even Jungkook's heartbeat felt like it paused for a second too long. What? The vial, Jimin continued, each word heavier than the last. It wasn't supposed to react like that. I checked it, I tested it, but when you opened it. His voice faltered. Something was different. Jungkook's stomach dropped. You're saying? They knew, Jimin finished, they knew you'd find it. Jungkook turned slowly toward the men across the table, his expression shifting from confusion to something darker. You set this up. The man didn't deny it. Didn't confirm it either. But his silence said enough. Jungkook let out a shaky breath, disbelief crashing into anger. You used me. No, the man said calmly, we used the situation. That's the same thing. Not quite. Jungkook stepped forward, his fists clenching at his sides. You almost killed me. And yet here you are. The coldness in his tone made something snap. Jungkook lunged forward. Jimin caught him before he could reach the table. Jungkook, stop. Let me go, Jungkook struggled against him, fury burning through every movement. They think this is a game. And that's exactly why you can't play into it, Jimin's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. Jungkook froze. Not because he wanted to, but because Jimin's grip tightened just enough to ground him. Look at me, Jimin said, his voice lower now. Jungkook hesitated. Then did. And what he saw. It wasn't control. It wasn't strategy. It was fear. Real. Unfiltered. They want us to break, Jimin continued quietly, to turn on each other because it makes this easier for them. Jungkook's breathing slowed slightly, though the anger still burned beneath the surface. They already succeeded, he said bitterly. Jimin flinched. But didn't let go. Not completely, he said. A fragile truth. One that neither of them fully believed, but neither of them were ready to let go of either. The man across the table leaned back, watching the exchange with mild interest. Touching, he said, but ultimately irrelevant. Jimin's gaze snapped back to him, cold and sharp. You're not in control of this. We are, the man replied simply, you just haven't accepted it yet. Jimin's lips pressed into a thin line. Jungkook slowly pulled away from him, stepping back, but not as far as before. Not completely. What do you want? Jungkook asked, his voice steadier now, though the tension still lingered. The man smiled. Finally. Compliance. The word echoed in the room, heavy with implication. Jimin's jaw tightened, and if we refuse. The man's eyes darkened slightly. Then everything you fear becomes reality. Silence followed. But this time it felt different. Because now, Jungkook knew. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. This was about survival. And the line between right and wrong had never felt so dangerously thin. The word compliance didn't fade, it settled into the room like something toxic, seeping into every corner, every breath, every thought. Jungkook felt it in his chest, heavy and suffocating. Jimin felt it in the way his fingers twitched, like his body was already rejecting the idea before his mind could process it. No. The word came out before either of them could stop it. Both of them spoke at the same time. They froze. For a brief second their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them, not forgiveness, not resolution. But something closer to instinct. A line they hadn't fully crossed yet. The man across the table tilted his head slightly, amused. That wasn't very strategic. Jimin leaned forward slowly, his gaze sharp and unyielding. We're not interested in your version of strategy. You should be. We're not. The tension snapped tighter. Jungkook stepped in beside him now, not behind, not separate, beside. His voice was quieter, but it carried just as much weight. You built this whole system on fear, he said, his eyes locked onto the man. Threats, manipulation, control, but you made one mistake. The man raised an eyebrow slightly. Oh. Jungkook didn't hesitate. You assumed we'd turn on each other. Silence. Sharp. Electric. Jimin glanced at him briefly, something flickering in his expression, surprise maybe or something deeper, but Jungkook didn't look back. Not this time. The man's smile thinned. Didn't you? Jungkook's jaw tightened, not in the way you wanted. Jimin exhaled slowly as if grounding himself in that statement, letting it settle into something real. Then he straightened slightly, his voice calmer now but far more dangerous. You've been pulling strings from the shadows, he said, but you're not as untouchable as you think. The man chuckled softly, and what exactly are you going to do about it? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, until now he didn't know. But something had shifted. Jungkook's presence beside him wasn't just emotional, it was stabilizing. It cut through the chaos, through the fear, through the instinct to act alone. You said you had evidence, Jungkook added, his voice steady, something that could destroy me. Yes. Then release it. The words hit like a detonation. Jimin's head snapped toward him. What are you doing? Jungkook didn't look away from the man. If your entire system depends on threats, then take them away. That's not how this works, the man replied coolly. Then make it work, Jungkook shot back, because I'm not playing this game. Jimin grabbed his arm suddenly, his grip tight. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. You're risking everything. Jungkook turned to him now, his expression unwavering despite the storm behind his eyes. So are you. The words landed. Hard. Jimin's grip loosened slightly. You were willing to go this far alone, Jungkook continued, quieter now, to carry all of this by yourself, to become someone you didn't even recognize anymore. Jimin flinched. But I'm here now, Jungkook said, so stop shutting me out and let me stand with you. The room fell silent again. But this time it wasn't suffocating. It was shifting. Jimin stared at him, something fragile and unguarded surfacing in his eyes, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since this started. Trust. Or at least the beginning of it. You don't understand what they'll do, Jimin said, his voice quieter now. Then show me, Jungkook replied, stop deciding for me. A long pause stretched between them. Then, slowly, Jimin nodded. It was small, barely noticeable. But it changed everything. Fine, he said. The man across the table watched the exchange carefully, his expression unreadable now, not amused, not dismissive. Calculating. Interesting, he murmured, very interesting. Jimin turned back to him, the hesitation gone, replaced with something colder. You want compliance? Yes. Then here's the problem, Jimin said, you don't actually have control anymore. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Jimin reached into his pocket. Jungkook's pulse spiked instantly. Jimin. Relax, Jimin muttered under his breath, though his own hands weren't completely steady. He placed something on the table. A small device. Simple. Unassuming. But the moment it hit the surface, the atmosphere in the room changed. What is that? The man asked, his tone still calm, but the edge was there now. Jimin leaned back slightly. A mistake, he said. The man's gaze sharpened. Explain. Jimin's lips curved faintly, but there was no warmth in it. You think you're the only one who plans ahead. Jungkook stared at the device, realization dawning slowly. What did you do? Jimin didn't look at him. Not yet. I knew they'd come for me eventually, he said instead, his eyes still locked onto the man across the table. So I made sure I wouldn't walk into it empty-handed. The man's expression darkened. You're bluffing. Am I? Silence. Tense. Uncertain. Jimin tapped the device lightly with his finger. You like evidence, right? He continued. Records, files, things that can't be ignored. The man didn't respond. But the shift was there. Subtle. But real. Jungkook felt his heartbeat quicken as pieces started falling into place. You've been collecting something. Jimin finally looked at him. And this time there was no hesitation. No wall. Yes. The single word changed everything. How much? Jungkook asked. Enough. The man leaned forward slightly, his composure cracking just enough to reveal the tension beneath. You think that changes anything? I know it does, Jimin replied. Because if anything happens to us. He tapped the device again. Everything goes public. The room went completely still. Jungkook's breath caught. The weight of it settled instantly. A dead man's switch. The man's smile disappeared entirely now. For the first time, there was no pretense. You're playing a dangerous game. Jimin didn't flinch. You started it. A long silence followed. Heavy. Unpredictable. Then, the man leaned back slowly, studying them both with a new kind of interest. Maybe I underestimated you, he admitted. Jimin didn't respond. Jungkook didn't either. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. But something had changed. The balance. Slight. Fragile. But real. And for the first time since this began, they weren't completely powerless anymore. They had something. Something that could shift everything. Or destroy them just as easily. The man stood. The others followed. This conversation isn't finished, he said calmly. Jimin's gaze didn't waver. No, it's just getting started. The man paused at the door, glancing back one last time. Be careful, he said, leverage cuts both ways. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Silence filled the room again. But this time it was different. Not suffocating. Not empty. Just uncertain. Jungkook exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. You really set that up. Jimin didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on the door, his mind still racing, still calculating. I had to, he said finally. Jungkook studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. Next time, he said quietly, don't do it alone. Jimin glanced at him. And for the first time in a long time, there was no distance in his eyes. Next time, he replied, I won't. The words hung there. Fragile. But real. And even though the storm outside hadn't stopped, inside that room something had shifted. Not fixed. Not healed. But no longer completely broken. The door had barely closed when the silence turned sharp again, like the air itself was waiting to see what they would do next. Jungkook let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding, his body still tense, adrenaline refusing to settle. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had moved closer while they weren't looking. That was insane, he muttered, packing once before dragging a hand through his hair. You just threatened them with something we don't even know will work. It will work. Jimin's voice was quiet, but there was no hesitation in it. Jungkook stopped, turning to him. You sound very sure for someone who almost lost control 5 minutes ago. Jimin didn't react immediately. He stood still, eyes fixed on the door like he was still calculating outcomes that hadn't happened yet. I didn't lose control, he said finally. Jungkook let out a dry laugh. You were shaking. I'm still standing. That's not the same thing. The words lingered, heavier than expected. Jimin finally looked at him, something flickering behind his gaze. You think I don't know that? Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because he did know. He had seen it, the cracks, the fear, the pressure Jimin had been carrying alone for too long. And somehow that made everything worse. You should have told me, Jungkook said again, quieter now but no less intense. Not just about them, about all of it. I know. Then why didn't you? Jimin exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping just slightly like the fight was draining out of him in pieces. Because the moment I said it out loud, it would have become real for you too. It already is real, Jungkook shot back. You don't get to decide when I face it. I wasn't deciding, Jimin said, his voice tightening again. I was delaying it. For what? A better time, Jungkook shook his head. There is no better time for something like this. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything that had gone unsaid for too long. Jimin looked away first. I was scared, he admitted, the words barely audible. Jungkook froze. It wasn't something Jimin said often. Maybe never like that. Of them, Jungkook asked. Jimin shook his head slowly. Of you. That hit harder than anything else. Jungkook's chest tightened. Me. Of what you'd think, Jimin continued, his voice steady but fragile underneath. Of what it would do to us. I thought if I could just handle it quietly, if I could fix it before it got worse. You protect me, Jungkook finished. Jimin nodded once. Jungkook let out a long breath, his gaze dropping to the floor as he processed it. That's not how this works, he said finally. You don't protect someone by lying to them. I wasn't lying. You hid the truth, that's not better. Jimin didn't argue this time. Because he couldn't. The truth sat heavy between them, undeniable and raw. Jungkook stepped closer, not aggressively this time but deliberately. Look at me. Jimin hesitated. Then did. You don't get to carry everything alone anymore, Jungkook said, his voice firm. Not after this. Jimin's jaw tightened slightly. You say that like it's a choice. It is. You don't understand what's coming. Then help me understand instead of shutting me out. The words settled deeper this time. Not sharp. Not explosive. But solid. Real. Jimin held his gaze, searching for something: doubt, fear, hesitation, but found none. And that scared him more than anything. Once you're in this, Jimin said quietly, there's no stepping back. Jungkook didn't flinch. I already stepped in the moment I opened that bag. A pause. Then. You really don't know when to stop, Jimin muttered. Jungkook let out a faint, humorless smile. Neither do you. For a brief moment, something almost lighter passed between them, not peace, not resolution, but a shared understanding of just how deep they were in this. Then reality came crashing back. Jungkook's expression shifted. That device, the one you put on the table. Jimin's posture stiffened slightly. It's real, isn't it? Jungkook pressed. The data, the evidence. Jimin hesitated. Then nodded. Yes. Jungkook exhaled slowly. What kind of evidence? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Because even now, there were still lines he hadn't crossed. But Jungkook was waiting. And this time he didn't look like he was going to let it go. Everything, Jimin said finally. Internal communications, financial records, names. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. Names. People involved, people who know what's happening and choose to ignore it. A chill ran through Jungkook. That's not just leverage, he said quietly, that's exposure. I know. You could bring the whole thing down. Jimin's expression darkened, or get us both destroyed before we even try. Silence. Heavy. Complicated. Jungkook leaned back slightly, processing it all, his mind racing through possibilities, risks, consequences. You said it triggers if something happens to us, he said. What counts as something? Jimin's lips pressed into a thin line. That's the problem, he admitted. I don't fully control it anymore. Jungkook's head snapped up. What? I set it up as a safeguard, Jimin continued, his voice tightening, but I had to involve someone else to make it work, someone I trust. Jungkook's chest tightened again. Who? Jimin didn't answer. Not right away. And that hesitation. It brought everything rushing back. The secrecy. The distance. The things left unsaid. Jimin, Jungkook said, his voice sharper now. Who? Jimin looked at him. And for a second, it felt like everything might break again. You're not going to like it, he said quietly. Jungkook let out a frustrated breath. At this point I don't think that matters. Another pause. Longer this time. Then. It's someone from inside. The words landed heavy. Jungkook's stomach dropped. Inside the company. Jimin nodded. Someone who's been helping me from the start. Jungkook stared at him, disbelief creeping back in. You've been working with someone else this whole time. I didn't have a choice. Stop saying that, Jungkook snapped, the frustration flaring again. You always have a choice, you just didn't trust me enough to include me in it. That's not. Then what is it? Jungkook demanded. Because from where I'm standing it looks like you trusted someone else more than me. That hit. Jimin's expression tightened, something defensive rising again. It's not about trust, he said. Then what is it about? Survival. The word cut through everything. Jungkook fell silent. Because that he couldn't argue with. Jimin took a step closer, his voice lower now, more controlled. The person I worked with, they were already in a position to help, they had access I didn't, resources I couldn't get. And I did, Jungkook shot back immediately. You had everything to lose. And they did. Jimin hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Jungkook saw it. You don't even know that for sure, he said, his voice quieter now but sharper than before. You're gambling with someone else's loyalty and you didn't even tell me. I didn't have time to explain everything. You had time to plan an entire operation but not enough time to trust me with it. The room seemed to close in again, the fragile ground they had just rebuilt cracking under the pressure. Jimin's voice rose, frustration breaking through. I was trying to keep you out of it. And I told you I don't want to be kept out of it. Their voices clashed again, louder, sharper, the tension snapping back into something volatile. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Jungkook demanded. Why is it so hard for you to just let me in? Jimin froze. Because the question wasn't about the situation anymore. It was about them. And the answer, the real answer, was something he wasn't ready to say out loud. So he didn't. And that silence said everything. Jungkook stared at him for a long moment, something in his expression shifting again, not anger this time, not even disappointment. Something deeper. Right, he said quietly. Jimin's chest tightened. Jungkook. Let's just focus on what matters, Jungkook cut him off, his voice suddenly calm in a way that felt more dangerous than before. They're not going to back down. No. And now they know we have something on them. Yes. Which means they'll come after us harder. Jimin nodded slowly. They won't wait this time. Jungkook exhaled, his mind settling into something sharper, more focused despite everything. Then we don't wait either. Jimin's gaze snapped to him. What are you thinking? Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since this began, there was no hesitation. No doubt. We stop reacting, he said, we make the next move. Jimin's pulse quickened. Because that was something he understood. Something he could work with. You're talking about going after them directly, he said. Jungkook nodded. Yes. A dangerous idea. A reckless one. But also, the only one that made sense anymore. Jimin studied him for a moment, then let out a slow breath. You really don't do things halfway, do you? Jungkook's lips curved slightly, but there was no humor in it. Neither do you. Another pause. Then, Jimin nodded. All right. The word felt like a turning point. We do it together. Jungkook held his gaze. Together. And for the first time since everything fell apart. They weren't just reacting anymore. They were choosing. The city was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. From the rooftop, everything below looked distant, lights scattered like fragments of something broken, streets empty, the storm finally gone but leaving behind a heavy, suffocating stillness. Jungkook stood near the edge, his hands resting against the cold railing, his gaze fixed on nothing and everything at once. Behind him the door creaked open. He didn't turn. You always come up here when you're thinking too much. Jimin's voice was softer now, stripped of the sharp edges it once carried, but it still held weight, history, regret, something unspoken lingering beneath every word. Jungkook exhaled slowly. I'm not thinking too much. Jimin stepped closer. That's a lie. A faint smile touched Jungkook's lips, but it didn't last. I guess I learned from you. That made Jimin stop. For a moment, the air between them tightened again, not with anger this time, but with something more fragile. Jimin moved forward anyway, stopping beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence but not close enough to touch. Not yet. It's done, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook nodded once. It was. Everything they had uncovered, everything they had risked, it had finally come to light. The data Jimin had collected, the failsafe he had set in motion, the truth buried beneath layers of control and manipulation, it had all surfaced. Names exposed. Secrets revealed. The system that had tried to control them had begun to collapse under its own weight. But victory didn't feel like victory. It felt heavy. They'll rebuild, Jungkook said after a moment. They always do. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It carried the weight of everything they had been through, the lies, the fear, the moments where everything almost broke beyond repair. I should have told you from the beginning. Jimin's voice was steady, but there was no hiding the regret in it now. Jungkook didn't look at him. I know. That doesn't make it okay. No, Jungkook admitted, it doesn't. Another pause. The wind picked up slightly, brushing past them, carrying the faint scent of rain that hadn't fully disappeared. I thought I was protecting you, Jimin continued. I thought if I could handle it alone you wouldn't have to carry any of it. Jungkook finally turned his head, his gaze settling on Jimin, not cold, not distant, but searching. And now? Jimin met his eyes. Now I know I was wrong. There was no hesitation this time. No excuses. Just the truth. Jungkook studied him for a long moment as if weighing something, past against present, trust against doubt, everything that had been broken against the possibility of rebuilding. You don't get to decide things for me like that again, he said finally. I won't. And no more secrets. Jimin hesitated. Not because he wanted to lie, but because he knew how dangerous the truth could be. Still, I won't, he repeated. Jungkook nodded slowly. It wasn't forgiveness. Not completely. But it was a start. You scared me, Jungkook admitted after a moment, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable than before. Back there when I collapsed, I thought. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jimin's expression shifted instantly, guilt flashing across his face, sharp and immediate. I know. I thought you chose all of this over me. The words landed heavier than anything else. Jimin's breath caught. I didn't, he said quickly, I never would. But it felt like you did. Silence. Jimin looked away for a second, his jaw tightening before he forced himself to meet Jungkook's gaze again. I was afraid of losing you, he said, and somehow I almost did that myself. Jungkook didn't respond right away. Because there was nothing to argue with. It was the truth. And the truth had already done enough damage. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, pulling at their clothes, carrying the weight of everything that had happened into the open air. What happens now? Jungkook asked. Jimin let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing just slightly. We move forward. Jungkook raised an eyebrow faintly, that simple. No, Jimin admitted, but it's the only option we have. A faint silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was quiet. Real. Jungkook looked back out at the city, his expression thoughtful. They're not all gone, he said, the people behind this, the system. Jimin followed his gaze, no. So this isn't really over. Jimin shook his head slightly, it never is. Jungkook exhaled, a small, almost tired smile appearing for just a second. Figures. Another pause. Then, Jimin stepped closer. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just steady. Whatever comes next, he said, his voice low but certain, we face it together. Jungkook didn't move at first. Then slowly. He nodded. Together. The word felt different now. Not fragile. Not uncertain. Something stronger. Something chosen. They stood there in silence after that, side by side, not looking at each other but not needing to either. The distance that had once felt impossible to cross had been narrowed, not erased, not forgotten, but understood. The city below continued to breathe, unaware of how close everything had come to falling apart, unaware of the quiet war that had been fought in the shadows. And maybe that was how it would always be. Not everything needed to be seen to matter. Not everything needed to be perfect to be real. Jungkook closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the wind wash over him, letting the noise inside his head settle into something quieter. When he opened them again, he didn't feel the same. Not lighter. Not free. But steadier. And beside him, Jimin stood the same way, changed but still there. Still choosing to stay. The storm had passed. But its echoes remained. And maybe that was enough. Because this time, they weren't facing it alone.